Welcome back to the Self-Esteem and Confidence Mindset podcast with me, Johnny Pardo. Today, I have a guest on the episode with me. So welcome, Serena.
Thank you so much for having me, Johnny. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you on. And today we're going to be talking about your emotions and pain and our relationship with that and our mind and body a little bit. So just a quick introduction to Serena. And then Serena can say a little bit more about herself and what she does. So Serena helps people with physical and emotional pain feel better faster. So Serena, that's a great thing to be doing. And obviously there's in today's world, there's a lot of, there's a lot of great stuff, but some of us can experience physical and emotional pain both because they can link. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you into this area.
So I got into this from personal experience. And what I do now is I help people identify and release the underlying emotions that get trapped in the body and come out and manifest most often as chronic pain or medically unexplained symptoms, but also anxiety, depression, like relationship, work issues. And this stemmed out of I'd always had an interest in how your thoughts affect your body, but I was working for a magazine in New York City. I just finished a master's in international journalism in London. And then I moved to New York City and I got a job at Spirituality and Health. And I was there 3 weeks before 9/11, and 9/11 happened on my way to work, which was, I didn't really know how to make sense of it. So what I did, which I've done before in my life, was I just repressed it all. But then I got extremely tired, like debilitating fatigue. And my medical doctor diagnosed me with chronic fatigue syndrome. And so and then he was like, just learn to live with it. There's no cure. And that wasn't acceptable. So I found I found different ways of trying to unwind this. And the ones that worked the best are now what I do for my clients. So it stemmed from like understanding what I repressed that day, and how I was getting stuck in my body, more or less.
Oh, okay. No, that's, it's really interesting. Sometimes I've discovered it as well when actually I've had like aching muscles or whatever. And then, when I've done a little bit of sometimes inner work, whether that's like inner child work or kind of a deep bit of journaling, and, sometimes takes a bit to journal down to something. There's always work to go on and on throughout a life, but yeah, just that kind of release. So, I love the way you approached it, and you say, I'm not going to accept this with this diagnosis of, chronic fatigue. I want to do something about it. So no, that's very admirable. And now you're obviously helping people do that a little bit. So obviously you've done some work on yourself. So how important do you find it is for people to sit with themselves and actually, be a bit more self-aware? Is that something you encourage?
I laugh because I think it's like extremely important. Like I recognize that a lot of people aren't that in tune with themselves. They may think that they are, but then something happens and you get an ache that was never there before. And you're like, oh, well, I just must have bent over the wrong way. That's why I have low back pain. Or it's like, but it came on out of nowhere. Like you didn't injure yourself. But we tend to look towards the physical cause because that's how we've basically been indoctrinated to believe these things. And most often people be like, oh, well, just, I'll take an Aleve or an aspirin or whatever it is. I hope it goes away. But what happens when it doesn't go away? So I feel that it's extremely important to be able to try and understand these things on your own. All the answers do really lie within yourself. Like I just see myself now as a conduit for like understanding how to identify things, but then I also teach people how to unravel them themselves. And so like, say you got a pain in your back. If you start to put together pieces in your life of like, oh, well, actually the day before I had a really big fight with my partner. And then you can connect the dots rather than being like, I bet that's not connected. But what if it is connected? What if there's all this anger that you couldn't express and now you're still fuming about it? And now it's showing up in your body. Your body is trying to communicate something to you. It's not just betraying you or just being a pain in the back. It's actually the mind and body are connected. And so if you have something going on in your body, it could be something that you're not giving enough weight to in your personal life or professional life.
Yeah. It's it's so interesting sometimes the things that can trigger off. I've been listening to, like one of the books I'm reading recently is The Mountain Is You, and kind of looking at actually why we sabotage, and that's probably a bit more the psychological side, but actually, so some of our behaviors can be as a result of repressed things, but also what you're looking at is why perhaps some of these signs your body's trying to tell you something, is because you need to, there's something there that's hidden that needs to be confronted. So do you find, like, kind of from your experience, that maybe sometimes people aren't aware, obviously, or it sounds like, from maybe something's triggered that pain, but do you find there are sometimes when people actually are aware, but they refuse to perhaps confront that challenging event?
Yeah, I think that it's hard. It's hard to confront it because I think that it's just easier to, this is why a lot of people get surgery over actually doing some more psychological work, because it's a lot easier to be like, oh, well, it's that thing in my body. It has to come out and then my body will work better. But there's something called failed back syndrome, I think, or failed back surgery, maybe, where, okay, the doctor takes the thing out of your back, but it didn't always need to be taken out in the first place. It was something, it will come back if you don't find the root cause. And so I think it's very difficult for a lot of people to do some inner excavation and be like, so I didn't handle that very well. Like you can't, it's like no one wants to be called on their BS basically, and realize that they could have handled things better. There could be other things to process. And by doing so, it's not always like the most comfortable conversations to have with yourself or other people. But the more you do that, the more you pull out the stuff that's getting in the way of feeling better.
Yeah. I've certainly heard stories of people I've known who've kind of had those similar situations as well, when you really don't want to, and I've been there as well, to be, that you don't want to confront something. So yeah, and again, it goes down to what kind of pain you're willing to do. I guess sometimes if people knew what physical pain they might have as a result, they perhaps wouldn't refuse to do that upfront work. So it's quite interesting how we avoid pain in the short term sometimes, and how it could manifest in different ways in another way. So one of the things I'm very keen on helping people with is kind of like measuring things, measuring improvements, how they're feeling emotionally, physically. I do this for myself, like, financially, in your business, all those kind of things. Do you find it effective, or have you tried any kind of measurement ways on how people are feeling to measure that? Sorry, let me say that again. Have you found any effective ways for measuring people's kind of physical energy or emotional energy? Is that something you kind of look at regularly, or does it depend on the individual?
I'm not sure I completely understand what that would look like. So I would measure like how, like on a level of like 1 to 10, with 10 being the worst, like where is your back pain today kind of thing.
Yeah.
I often do that if someone's presenting with chronic pain. And especially what I've noticed with some of the chronic pain I work with is that you'll get rid of pain in your shoulder, but then it moves to your hip. And then like you're so elated that the hip pain went away, but now you have foot pain. So it's kind of like your body becomes like a pinball machine for where the pain shows up. And that's really just the mind being like, okay, this is emotional, but you haven't figured out everything yet. So every time someone comes into the Zoom room, because I see people remotely, but I ask them to rate their pain, even if it's emotional pain, of like how much is this affecting your life? How much does this hurt and affect you today? And then by the end of the session, I reassess it to find out if it got worse or got better. Most people always get better, but sometimes it shows up in a different part of the body.
Oh, okay, no, that's really interesting. Giving them both scores right on their emotions and physical then in those sessions. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
awesome. I was so okay. No, that's something I was intrigued with, kind of when people kind of like, you know, different coaches, different practitioners, teachers, mentors out there, kind of how we would have individuals to really look at measuring things in different ways. So no, that's great to know. So in terms of, you know, people, what we were talking about a little bit earlier, in terms of people's time and being able to actually, you know, find the time and be self-aware, are there any kind of like small habits you encourage people to do in terms of being able to sit with themselves each day?
I think that the more you can go inside, and it doesn't have to take a long time, you could just do a visual meditation for 5 or 10 minutes. Anytime that you notice that you're, a little bit anxious, you're running from place to place, and or you have these thoughts that keep going around and around, or there is something that's really bothering you, if you can just take some deep breaths. And when you do that, to also just imagine different things. I mean, maybe you already have something that works. And then I would imagine just, closing your eyes and breathe in and out, like breathe out like a big golden bubble that surrounds you. And then it surrounds your town. And then it surrounds your country. And then it surrounds your world. And then it surrounds your entire galaxy, that kind of thing. And then like do it in reverse. That's like just one, kind of like a guided imagery, guided visualization. And what you'll notice is that, you can also at the same time be very like cognizant of your breathing, so that you also want to like breathe in a way that, like, a lot of people when they breathe, which is like has been me included up until a certain point, like we kind of like, and we breathe in and like our whole chest moves up, but that's more of a fight or flight breathing. Right? Like you're just kind of like, you're not really just steady. Like, and if you allow yourself to just really breathe, like I really do feel like the answers come from being so grounded in your body. And you can ask yourself, and then sometimes you can ask yourself, like, how does this issue affect you? Where do you feel it in your body? And just sit with that and don't make it wrong and don't try to change it. And then sometimes it will just improve on its own. Or you'll just, even if it doesn't improve, you'll feel better. And you just sit with how you feel. And often you just feel lighter, or you feel like you're floating. You feel all different things, in my opinion. It's different for everyone. But I think that the more you can do that, take 5 or 10 minutes when you can. You can also, at the end of the day, I find this really helpful, is to write. And you can do like a stream of consciousness writing, which often helps when you're like, I don't know what to write about. I don't know what to write about. Just write that until something comes.
Yeah.
But you can think of all the stress that happened from like the moment you woke up until the time you got home. Person cut you off on the road, someone wasn't nice to you at the grocery store, whatever it was. You just write that down and you dump it into the computer, or into your, like, when you're writing it, and that helps get things out of your mind so that you don't have to think about it anymore. All of that helps. So but it doesn't have to take long. You can just do 5 or 10 minutes. Sometimes you end up having a lot more to say, and sometimes you have a lot more of like, oh, this is a good feeling, when you're sitting there in a guided meditation also.
Yeah, exactly. You can always extend if you want and do more of it.
Yeah.
like what you said about the breathing. It's quite interesting. It's sort of experimented a bit of Wim Hof and various breathing exercises from like Tony Robbins events and things like that. But yeah, it kind of it's crazy how the changing the breath can actually have that massive impact. I found personally for me. So I like what you say about the flight or flight response when you're when you're breathing in that way. Like, you know, there's a real life danger, but often it's not a real life danger, but the, you know, brain's blowing it out of proportion. Certainly.
Yeah. And I never realized that until I did a breathing exercise with someone. And they were like telling people like, okay, if you're feeling your chest like getting really big, like try not to have your chest like have the air go into your chest, but just focus on it being in your belly rather than you're coming into your chest. I thought that was really, I was like, that's such a small detail that can make all the difference.
Yeah, crazy. It can, you know, changes your, you know, your thought, slows you down a little bit, I found as well. So yeah, thinking of your it going into your belly rather than your chest breathing.
Mm-hmm.
When and thank you for sharing earlier about, obviously you had a very traumatic, you know, experience that you kind of repressed at the time, and then it drained your you found it was draining your energy, sort of like being stored away. Did you find yourself perhaps a little bit more prone to, you know, get stressed a little bit more easily after that event? Or did you not notice, or was it just that?
I think that I was in shock for a while and I was just kind of walking through the motions of living. I was trying to stay interested and engaged and like knowing what was asked of me for the magazine I was working for. But I feel like whatever stress would happen, I think that some stuff annoyed me. But after a while, I think I just became kind of apathetic of like, what in psychology we term learned helplessness of like, well, I've tried this, it's not going to work. Oh, well, I'll just give up. So until I got help in getting the fatigue out of my body, I think it was kind of like that kind of feeling.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And did it kind of, obviously you said you were tired, and it kind of comes on to my next question, but did you feel like it impacted on your sleep, or were you quite able to sleep because you were so drained? Or was it actually when you went to sleep, it was just a difficult job to get to sleep?
Well, no, that was the problem, was that I was sleeping too much. I was like, it was debilitating fatigue. And so I feel like I actually probably started to get tired while I was studying journalism in London. And then it just got exacerbated by coming to New York and working at this magazine, being like 2 blocks from the World Trade Center. And so what I used to do though is I would go to the World Trade Center used to have an underground mall, and I would go there for lunch and then I'd walk all around, and then I'd come to my desk and I would basically slouch in my desk, like my desk chair, and turn it around and take a little nap. Like that's not normal. Like, fortunately, no one ever caught me. And I'd probably just be like, oh, what? You know, but I basically, then I had to work from home for 5 months because my office, well, it wasn't really damaged from the 9/11 stuff, but it was like all the ash from outside came through the vents. And so it just covered everything in our office, like in our like 24 floors, which is not very high in New York. But and so I worked from home, and then I'd just be like, oh, I'm just going to take a nap. And I would take like a 2-hour nap on my sofa. Or I'd like go to bed at like 9, but I'd wake up at like 7. I mean, I was just sleeping all the time. I was just like walking around 2 blocks in New York, which is nothing when you're, you know, so much going on like in London or anywhere big city. And be like, oh, I have to take a nap. I do the dishes. Oh my God, I have to take a nap. Like everything tired me out. So I'd sleep a lot.
Yeah. Okay. No, it's yeah. I can relate to the 2-hour nap thing as well in the past. Yeah. definitely.
They're lovely. Then you wake up and you're like, ah, what time is it? Where, what, when they're that nice. Spot on.
Also been doing some like hypnosis, sort of like those hypnosis meditations recently as well. I try different things, but when I've been doing that, lying down and then suddenly wake up at the end thinking it's been 5 hours, but it's been 20 minutes. So I've been the opposite way as well. So
Those are good too.
it's interesting. Yeah, those Marissa Peer kind of ones I've been listening to. So no, that's interesting. Well, I'm glad you've obviously worked through that now, the kind of the sleep, but yeah, so it's kind of making me tired think about it. But yeah, again, it was something, like we'll say again, that you didn't realize was there. And if anyone's listening, obviously, if there is some physical condition perhaps that's come on in last year, the last few months, perhaps it is, you need to go a bit deeper and understand what's caused that, like Serena did, obviously, and then you found that out. So in terms of the one thing I'm very keen to talk about is the power of our environment and our community around us, because there's a few good books I've read on it, but I notice obviously when I'm around people who give me energy and uplift me and make me feel good, that makes a big difference. Did you find perhaps in your situation or anyone you've worked with that the power of who they're around makes a difference?
Yes, I see this all the time. I see it in my own life. I see it with clients and friends, that it's oftentimes we don't notice it or we don't acknowledge it because, say, it's like family or someone you've been friends with for 20 years. But you either like, as you're going to be hanging out with this person, you get some sort of symptom that seems a little bit different than what you normally experience. Or after that experience of being around that person, you feel really low energy, or you feel kind of like more depressed or something like that, then that will give you a sign or a clue that maybe that person, just isn't the best person to be around in large chunks of time. Or maybe that person is like giving you, it just doesn't, it doesn't feel good physically, and it doesn't feel good emotionally. And so, but I think it's really hard. I think a lot of people really want to be nice, and there's a bit of people pleasing. And so you don't want to, burn bridges and cut ties because you're just like, oh, well, that doesn't feel good to be around you. But you can do it in like small doses, or you can ask yourself, like, do I really get a lot of benefit? Do I feel like I'm giving and the other person is giving to me, or does it feel like it's a super drain? So I definitely think that your environment, which I would say is like who you surround yourself with, even what you take in on a day-to-day basis. Like, who do you follow on social media? Like, is it helping you feel good about yourself, or do you feel like you're comparing yourself and being like, oh, I suck because I'm not like this person who obviously, is edited and has all the perfect looks. And like, it's that kind of Facebook facade of like, we compare ourselves to like this version of other people that doesn't really exist, but we still then, criticize ourselves for not living up to that potential.
Yeah. Like what you're saying about social media, I wasn't gonna bring that up, but that's always a very good one, like who you're following and the information you're taking in, just being very mindful of that, as well as the people in your life. So yeah, I also really like what you said about actually being aware when you perhaps with someone who drains your energy a bit, and they're not necessarily a toxic person. They may just be someone who's perhaps you're at a stage in life where you're going different directions, and perhaps their beliefs on life are different from yours, and perhaps it doesn't give you that energy. So
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, because like, even when you're in a fight with someone, and like that person isn't necessarily wrong and you're right, but you both have two different ways of viewing something, and then you clash. Or yeah, I like how you said that, it's not necessarily the other person, but at one point in your life, you really got along, but now you don't, right? Like
Mm.
everyone changes. And so it's hard when like people grow apart, especially in friendships or relationships.
Yeah, definitely. It's there's some people realistically who are not going to be able to completely, and you said this as well, not able to completely cut out of our life, like certain family members or certain people. But it's just being mindful, I guess, about who you spend your majority of your time with, and just trying to be as careful and protective as that as possible. I think as Jim Rohn said, one of the quotes, his famous quotes was, "Be the guard to the door of your mind," which I really like. I love that one. Always kind of
Yeah.
being conscious about who you're letting in, or what you're letting in as well. And actually, I know it's kind of a similar point, but it's slightly different. The information as well you're consuming. So obviously you've got people talking to you, or you're having these interactions with people. But do you find the information people consume has an impact on them as well?
Absolutely. Like, I mean, just take the past 2 years, of how much are you consuming from the news? And a lot of the news, I mean, you
Mm.
could be looking at like someone who's being like, okay, we have a winter storm coming. But newscasters tend to dramatize and make it like the worst snowstorm of the century. Right.
Like
So,
last week and the week
right.
before. Yeah.
Yes. And like, and when I lived in Seattle, in Portland, it was like 5 different ways to describe rain. Maybe you get that in England also, or the UK, where it's just like everything's over the top sometimes. But for the news, and there's constantly so much fear around everything that's going on in the world. Like, how would anyone want to step out of their home if, we thought that we could die from getting hit by anything? Like, just there's so much information that we can take in, but there's even information um, from each other, and how we just like, there has to be a detox, in my opinion. Like, you can't just consume. Sometimes I find at the end of the day, I'm just like, okay, I'm just going to read a novel because I don't want to take in any more information from the internet or the news or
Mm.
anywhere. And so I think that it really does affect, like, you can sense, I think, in your body, you can sense how tense you are. You can sense if you're ruminating on like a swirling of information, and trying to like not take on the fear, the anxiety that you, because we can also sense that in other people, and then we can take that on ourselves.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, and again, both of them tie together, don't they? The information and the people you're around, um, and kind of some of those questions. I'm glad you brought up the news as well. I always kind of, people's decision at the end of the day, but just be very mindful of, what you're listening to, and if it's doing you any favors, only you know the answer yourself to that. But
Mm-hmm.
whether something's good for you, whether it's the person or the source of information. So yeah, I'm glad you brought up those ones. And actually, it's funny because we've just had, well, not funny that we've had a storm, a mini sort of storm. Well, for you UK, a storm's not massive anyway, but yeah, I had to be told by my mum, I think, that there was a storm because I don't watch the weather. She goes, there's a storm coming, is there? So we don't have too many of those regular kind of massive warning things, but yeah, they would tend to dramatize it here as well. So yeah, just be careful where your sources of information are coming from. That's what I'm saying. So a couple of kind of questions I just wanted to kind of run by you before we sort of wrap things up. So, and one of them actually relates to questions. So in terms of questions people might ask when they're perhaps in a bit of pain, they could be asking questions like, oh, why am I in this situation? Why does this keep getting worse? You might start asking, what's the cause of this? What could make this better? What can I take this opportunity to do and reflect on? Do you find there's, a a good approach to asking quality questions?
Yes, I would say that's some of my questions that I find most helpful in a situation when you have some sort of pain, whether it's physical or emotional, is to ask yourself, um, where was I? What was I doing within the past, like the month before some of this came on? Like, what was going on in my
Mhm.
life? And you may have to look at your calendar because, I can't remember what I ate like 3 nights ago. So I would have to look at my calendar and be like, okay, so on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis, like what was going on in my life? Was I traveling? Was I like, who was I with? Who were the people in my life? Did I have a big fight with someone? Was I annoyed with a friend? Um, because all of those questions may sound mundane, but they really, like, the people and the ways you interact with them and whether you were upset with someone or not, and didn't, especially if you didn't say something and you just held it in and you complained to a friend or something like that, like all of that has a huge effect on how you feel in your
Mm.
mind and your body. So I think that just some really basic questions like that, even though they sound basic, they actually will get you to kind of understand what was going on. Because when it comes down to it, like what I find with my clients is that actually something pretty major happened, but then you're like, oh, I'll deal with it later. But we don't really have time for later. So later becomes our bodies and our minds. And like
Mm.
someone could be like, starting a new job, which is exciting, but it also comes with a lot of stress. And having to navigate how you interact with your colleagues and whether there's one person, which, inevitably there's always one person, right? That like sometimes you just don't get along with. But you try to think like, oh, it's going to get better. It's fine. But that one person, for example, could be the reason that you held on to a lot of anger or resentment or sadness or whatever it was. And so if you start to connect the dots that way, then you can have a better understanding of why you may be feeling really frustrated or maybe irritated, or you may have some weird pain in your knee that was never there before. Like if you start to look at what was happening in around the time that the pain or the frustration developed, you can start to get answers.
Yeah. Yeah. So some good kind of quality exploring questions to more kind of curiosity than kind of this frustration of, oh, why am I in so much pain? And, being stuck there, getting curious because to get closer to the cause, not just treating these symptoms on the top.
Mm-hmm.
I like
Yeah.
that. And I like what you said as well. We say, maybe I'll deal with it sometime, but then later becomes our body. So yeah, that was a good quote there. I quite like. I picked up. Very, very true. So we've obviously had a really great bunch of insights from you today. And it's really, made me think, in certain situations back in my life and going forward. And I'm sure it's going to give everyone a huge wealth of information to think about in terms of actually if they're in pain, like physically, emotionally, actually just slowing down a bit and examining why that could be. So before we kind of wrap up today, are there any final points that you would share with us today?
Well, two come to mind. One
Mm.
is that um, we live in a instantaneous gratification type society. And so if you
Yes.
ask yourself questions and you're like, well, maybe it could be that. Well, maybe it could be that. And you don't really know. It's okay. Like I've just been going through something myself where I've been like, why is this so frustrating? Why is this issue? And then I've been like, and then I just let it go. And then like over the course of a week, I start to get clues and other answers. So if you don't get it in like 5 seconds, that's okay. Like it may come over the course of that night, or like maybe it'll take like a week or two. So just to allow yourself to know that it's okay to take some time to get the answers that you're looking for. And the other thought I had is that just like you can sink in and ask yourself questions and kind of come up with some answers, if you decide to go seek out help from someone else, I would do the same thing of sit with yourself and find out how it feels in your mind and your body to sit with this other person. Because I find that a lot of people think like, oh, I was referred to this like coach or therapist and now I have to stay with them, or like everyone else likes this person, I don't really like this person. That's okay. Like
Mm.
just tune into yourself and ask yourself, and you'll be serving your highest self if you listen and discern whether something feels good or not. Because just because other people like one account on social media or like one coach that everyone else likes, if you don't, listen to that.
Yeah. Listen back to you. If there's, if there's I guess what you're saying, if there's a resistance to something and from your internal self, but you're trying to justify, other people were saying it's right or doing it, then I must. But you're saying listen to that inner voice a bit more.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, great one to definitely end on. So, Serena, where can people find you if they want to find out more about your work?
You can go to my website, drserenasterling.com. It's a DR for a doctor. I was taking a break from social media, but I will probably go back on. So Instagram mainly.
Good move.
I needed it. Yeah. That's what I was trying to figure out. Why do I need a break? But it was a good break. So those are the two best places. Oh, and my book. I've published a book, came out last year called Pain, a Love Story, which talks about my personal experience with this mind body stuff, as well as clients I've helped.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll be sure to link all those in the description as well, so people can find you and grab your book as well. So thank you for sharing them. And once again, thank you for coming on today, Serena, and sharing everything you have with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. So that concludes today's episode. But remember, work on your self-confidence every single day.